Insellmilkom, jiena Marlene Scicluna nilqakom għal programm ieħor ta' Maltese DownUnder bi produzzjoni mill-belt ta' Melbourne. Illum ser nitkellmu mal-Konsul Ġenerali ta' Malta fil-Victoria, Victor Grech, dwar aspetti relatati ma' ċittadinanza u passaporti Maltin. Ser nitkellmu wkoll ma' membru mill-ewwel tim Malti ta' Aussie Rules Football li għadhom kemm ħadu sehem fit-turnament għat-Tazza tal-Armonija, organizzat mill-Australian Football International. U fl-aħħar nett nitkellmu ma' Dr. Simon Cremona mill-grupp komunitarju Music Works. Nibdew bl-ewwel taqsima tagħna tal-lum u nitkellmu mal-Konslu Ġenerali ta' Malta fil-Victoria, Victor Grech. Victor Grech is the Consul of Malta for Victoria. Today we're going to be talking about services at the consulate in Victoria, as well as other things that are related to citizenship and passport. So thank you so much for being our guest today.
You're welcome.
First of all, if we look at the services that are offered at the consulate in Melbourne, what kind of services do you offer?
Yes, predominantly it's passports, registrations of documents, and citizenship. That takes up, I would say, 80 or 85% of our time. Of course, there's always we need to do what is called the back office work. So once they submit documentation and so on, we need to check the paperwork, check online with the departments and so on. So predominantly consular work.
Speaking of back office and the documents, obviously if you're born in Malta it's very easy to get a Maltese passport, and if your father is Maltese it's very easy to get a Maltese passport as well if you can prove that he is actually born in Malta or Maltese. But what happens to the second and third generation that we have now who would like to apply for a Maltese passport and they might not have enough documentation? What happens then? What's the process for these people?
Yeah, first of all, I would say that after 1989, the laws have made it easier for those who are second generation born overseas to apply and eventually hold the Maltese passport. But initially, there is the first step that they have to go through the citizenship process. So what they do, we always advise that they get in touch with the consulate, and they will either by email or by calling directly, and then we will provide the necessary documentation and ensure that they follow whatever is required. Yeah, I mean, as far as documentation, if they don't have documentation, they have to, I would say that assuming that they would know at least the names of parents, grandparents, and so on, and then they have to make an effort to say when they were married, where, and so on. So these are basic details which they have to be available at their end, of course. But since in the old days the records used to be predominantly within the churches of Malta and so on, sometimes it's easier that they get certain information by contacting the parish churches as well. However, when they have the certain basic information available, nowadays they can apply online, which means that all certificates of births, marriages and deaths, if required, one can acquire them by inputting the data online, and they would receive them within 2 or 3 weeks maximum.
And I would assume it would be very important not to leave it to the very last minute, because sometimes some Maltese will say, oh yeah, we'll do it, even renewing passports, yeah? It takes a while, so they have to contact you as soon as they might think that either their passport is about to expire or that they need to apply for a new passport.
Correct. That's a very good point. I thank you for bringing that point straight away. We always advise not to make any travel booking unless they have a valid Maltese passport at their end, because renewing a passport sometimes could not necessarily be plain sailing, especially those who have been married in Australia. Although of course it's possible, but they need to register that with the Public Registry of Malta, because since 2012 the Public Registry records have become the official records for the passports. So unless their identity is registered with the Public Registry and updated correctly, there wouldn't be the possibility to issue the Maltese passport.
What are the benefits to have a Maltese passport, which nowadays it's an EU passport, so it's going to give you access to the rest of Europe?
Yes, according to the Visa Regulation Index of 2015, the Maltese passport is the 7th rated in the world, which means that it's possible to visit 167 states or territories. There are certain benefits which has, of course, been developed over many years. And besides being a member of the European Union, Maltese passport holders can stay longer than the 90 days which the Australian passport holders can stay. So they can stay longer than the 90 days, and they've got the freedom of movement to stay and settle in Malta as well.
And within Europe.
And within Europe, yes.
Yeah, it makes it much easier. And this brings to mind, actually, so if I've got dual citizenship and I've got an Australian passport and I've got a Maltese passport, how can I use both if I'm going, for example, to Malta and around Europe and then back home?
Yes, all those who have become Australian passport holders, they have to leave the territory of Australia with a valid Australian passport and enter the territory of Australia with an Australian passport. But then once they reach the Maltese or the Schengen area or the European area, it's best to produce the Maltese passport, because they are free to move without any restrictions, basically. Restrictions in terms of length of stay and any border controls within the Schengen area. Outside the Schengen area, there are 18 countries of Europe and Switzerland, including Switzerland, which is not an EU country, but it's also part of the Schengen, whereby they can travel without the need to produce the passport once they are within the Schengen territory. And for those who are not Australian passport holders, I want to remind all those to make sure that once they are in possession of the Maltese passport, they have to ensure they have a re-entry visa into Australia, because otherwise they may face the immigration and they can find some surprise at the airport.
Oh, you wouldn't want that. I would think we talked about services at the consulate. I would think you would be able to facilitate, obviously, trade between Malta and Australia and vice versa.
Yeah, it's true. Part of the responsibilities of the Consul General of Malta for Victoria is also to facilitate and encourage trade between the state of Victoria and Malta. And I am pleased to state that it has worked very smoothly. I've put in touch the Australian Advanced Manufacturing Council directly with the Malta enterprise to facilitate and identify areas of interest. But there have been individual interests which either inquiries or quite credible inquiries, whereby they had the possibility to relate directly with Malta enterprise for any possible development of a project. It could not necessarily be for Malta, but they can use Malta as a hub. They can use the banking facilities of Malta or other services which are based in Malta. And it's nowadays Malta is a member of the European Union. The market is we know, of course, the benefits of the European market, and we can put them in touch and give them the necessary advice as required.
Let's end on a bit of a creative note, shall we? What about Australian artists, musicians, I don't know, painters, who would like to go to Malta and maybe do gigs over there, or anything that has to do with the cultural and creative side? Are they able to contact you and get any information? And I don't know, there might be funds that are available for them, or is there a possibility that there might be funds available for them to facilitate that process?
Yeah, I mean, it's been on various occasions where it's been my pleasure to assist. There's been people who are not necessarily Maltese, and they would love to make an experience at St. James Cavalier, for example, and share their experience with other artists in Malta. There is a certain assistance, but it's very limited. There has been some form of funding as far as the Valletta 2018, but one has always to check whether funds are available and up to what limits. So yes, we will definitely be in a position to put them in touch and facilitate what sort of, we have to see individual requests, of course.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, and whoever would like to make contact with you, the consulate is at in the city of Melbourne on Collins Street, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
or
we
Little
are
Collins.
at Little Collins Street, number 343 on the level 6. We always advise that people not necessarily turn up unless it is an emergency. It's best to either send an email or contact us. But of course, those who turn up and would like to do an inquiry, we don't send them back.